What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the latest episode of the Live Life Now podcast. I typically like to go into inspirational things that I've experienced and just stories and different things that I've mentioned that might be fun to hear, or if you just have curiosity about certain industries that I have a lot of experience in, I'm happy to share that. Today's episode is once again about some of the industries I worked in, and most specifically, the first job I ever had, which was as a barista inside of a bookstore. It was pretty wild. I was probably about 19 years old or so, and I probably even a little bit on the older side to have my first job. But I, graduated high school. I was going to college, which was the priority, and I was working and going to school at the same time. I started working at the bookstore, but before I did that, I didn't know what I wanted to do, where I wanted to work. I tried to apply at an electronics store. I didn't get the job. I applied for the bookstore just like a block from there, and I wanted to work on the book floor of things. I thought it would be much nicer, more laid back, just something more my speed. And they basically said that they didn't have openings in the book floor at that moment. Would I be open to working in the cafe? Just trying to get something going, happy to try to have a job, whatever it took to start. I said, yes, I'll work in the cafe. And I ended up becoming a barista. Day one was a sign of what was to come. I worked on a weekend. The experienced person that was supposed to work there with me and the other new hire, we were both on our day one of working as a barista in the cafe. The one experienced person that was supposed to help us called out. They found out they were going to have to work with two brand new people, and they were like, no, not today. So it left me and another guy who later ended up joining me in my band Overboard. But at the time, we were brand new to our barista career, didn't know how to make the drinks, didn't know how to use the register, had a line from about 4 p.m. to about 11 p.m., usually about 20 people deep at all times. Stress, yeah, you name it. It was there that day. The people were staring at us. We probably weren't making the drinks correctly. We were taking forever. And I remember asking him a question like, hey, man, how do you do this? And he's like, it's my first day. And I'm like, oh, my gosh, it's my first day, too. And just knowing we were in big trouble. As time went on, we got better at our jobs. A lot of, that didn't have to happen again, thankfully. However, there were certain roles for the newbies typically. And I definitely got thrown into the bad role, which was the person that took out the trash. I always seemed like I was the trash collector at the end of the night, and our garbage bags were cheap and they would break, and we'd get coffee and stuff all over us all the time. Constantly went home smelling like coffee. I'd never even made a pot of coffee in my entire life up to that point. Didn't know what I was doing. We also had to bake goods, such as muffins. We had to make cookies. We had certain, drinks that we had to make, and we needed to basically for frappuccinos. We had to make the mix for that so that we could do it. We had to constantly restock our pastries and other items that we sold up at the front. We also had other retail items from the bookstore that we sold in the cafe. Those had to be properly stocked and shelved. We had a drink case that had to constantly be checked as well. Constantly, cleaning up the spot where the people get the sugar and the milk and everything, as that would constantly be dirty or messy, or the trash overflowed. We also had to go to the back to get items when we got low on things like chocolate or whatever for the mochas. It was a big operation. Plus, we had to clean dishes. We had to mop the floors. A lot of times, if we finished too early in the cafe and the book floor was still working on cleaning up the books, which they called slush, then they would make the cafe go help the book floor. it was interesting to say the least. It probably would have been a really bad experience if I was older and more experienced, but because I was so young and because it was my first job and because I was meeting a lot of people around my same age, it was exciting. I was meeting other musicians. I was meeting a lot of other creative people. I befriended customers on a couple of occasions, and that ended up going into basically have like a group of friends that I worked with there, and that was amazing. And also, as I mentioned, my coworker who started on day one with me ended up being my bandmate in my first ever band. I ended up meeting a girl there that we bonded really closely, and we dated a bit, or I don't even know if we could call it dating, but we hung out a lot, and we certainly liked each other for a period of time. And so I had that experience there too. But it was wild. There were constantly the expectations were ridiculous. The supervisors, in a lot of cases, were probably not qualified to be proper supervisors, but yet they were our supervisors and overlooking stuff. Later, eventually, I worked my way up a little bit. Basically, there was a lot of turnover, and the assistant manager position became open. I asked for the job. Reason I asked for it was because, number one, I didn't want to be there much longer, and it was my first job, and I wanted to build my resume the best I could so I could get my next job. Unfortunately, my next job after that was as the telemarketer, but I didn't know that at the time. Took on the management role, assistant manager role, which was cool to an extent. The nice parts of it were that I got to order items a lot of times. The cafe manager was often out, so I was doing orders of, hey, you know what? We never seem to order this type of muffins or this type of cookies. Yeah, let's order them. So I would get a lot more say in the products we sold and the things, because I would be the one ordering from this, catalog or whatever the heck we had. We would call up an 800 number and order from this third-party company. We typically, in regards to the drinks, we made Starbucks like drinks. We used Starbucks products in most of the drinks. A lot of people thought we were Starbucks. We were not. And some people didn't like that because they were trying to get Starbucks points or whatever. And we could not offer that because we were not under the same system. So we had no way to actually give them anything that would count towards their Starbucks rewards. What else happened over there? Well, there was a lot of people I didn't like in the cafe too. There was people that were obnoxious and people that thought they were something special. And of course, like, hey, that's fine, good for you. But when I had to work with them directly, not ideal. But I also had like really awesome coworkers who were in college, just much like I was. And it got to the point where we had such a good friend group that both me and my friends would show up on our days off just to hang out. We'd wait for our coworkers to get out of work so that we could go hang out after work. And once we made our like friend group, we had people's houses we'd go over to, whether they were the customers' houses that we'd befriended and made our social circle with, or my other coworkers. And it started off pretty tame at the beginning, just hanging out, watching movies and stuff. It eventually got more and more like a party, and it went from there. But it was really neat. I was feeling like responsible for myself in a way that I never had before. I felt like I basically had the best of many worlds. I was, I had friends. I felt like I was growing up and learning a lot about life. I had a job that, while it wasn't great a lot of times, I had a lot of good times there. We laughed a ton. If I had worked in the book floor, it would have been so much more boring. The cafe was always doing silly stuff, making each other laugh. it was pretty unprofessional in regards to the way we acted, but we were, barely out of high school, a lot of us. And in that aspect, like, what did they expect? Plus they weren't paying well, so they really couldn't uh, probably get the higher quality staff that would have been a little more by the book, I guess. Um, Management was tough. The big bosses were tough. There was a lot of unnecessary micromanaging and scrutiny at times, but also they were very hands off at other times. So for all the negative things that happened, I think back very positively of the overall experience. I lasted a year and a half there. I was one of the few people that was either willing or able to drive a lot. So I was constantly picking people up and getting our group together and just kind of coordinating it all. But I didn't live close. I was about a good half an hour away at least from where I worked. Plus I went to school over there too. So I got to the point as a supervisor that I was working 5 days a week and I was going full-time to school. So I was full-time in school the other 2 days. Then I was hanging out with friends all hours of the night. I was playing music a lot. I basically wasn't sleeping though after a while. And that took a toll on me. And then it started into this like semi-relationship thing. And, I was all over the place. So ultimately it had to end. I had a bit of a falling out with the girl that I liked. And then that was kind of like the last straw towards me leaving. But of course I still had many of the same friends, but of course, as time went on and people quit or got fired or whatever the case may be, the social circle, changed. And it was, it was sad to see people not be around anymore, at least not as much. And, you lose contact and you'd been so close and you'd been like working alongside one another or hanging out alongside each other multiple times a week for, maybe 2 years, and to go to, basically strangers again. At the same time, though, very appreciative of everybody. We did all types of cool stuff together. One time we even did a camping trip. We hung out. I mean, I had a point. I never, by any stretch of the imagination, felt popular in high school or any time before that for the most part. But I felt popular over at the bookstore and working there. It got to a point where I had about 20 people that I would have called my friend, that I probably could have asked to stay at their house if I needed, that I felt comfortable, hanging out with all hours of the night. And that was great. I was so grateful. I felt like I was having my high school experience in college in a lot of ways. And I was, building those relationships that I'd always wanted, not only with friends, but romantically with the band, and then making some money. And I was taking all types of cool music classes in school at the time. So I was kind of covering the best of many worlds. Later, though, of course, it ended. The friend group grew apart, but then it continued with the band stuff because then I made new friends at the club that we often played at. And then I made friends with other bands here and there, or at least made acquaintances with other bands. And it kind of continued for a while until all that kind of blew up as well. And then that's when I went through my tough times, where I went through some depression and many other things, because all of the amazing things that I had going had kind of come to an abrupt halt. And, it was just, it couldn't continue forever. And I had a lot of growing up to do. And I renewed my focus to finish college at that point and work on my bucket list goals and get into a better relationship and eventually travel. I did a lot of my early traveling and like starting in 2008, going to Europe, 2009, went back to Europe. And that really was like the bug that sealed the rest. I did trips to Mexico, I went to the Bahamas, all from like a stretch of like 2007 to like 2009 and 2010. And then, I had my daughters and things kept going from there. But being a barista was kind of the start of all of that. And I remember when the book floor option was not available, thinking, when they offered me the cafe instead of the book floor, I almost turned it down. I was like, man, I didn't really want to work in a cafe, but hey, you know what? They're offering me a job. Say yes. And I said yes. And I had incredible experiences I would have otherwise completely missed out on. One thing led to the next, always. Like the working at the cafe led to making all these friends. And then that making those friends led to having the band, and having the band led to me making friends with the places at the venues. And that job gave me management experience, which was helpful on the resume for later. And I learned how to do coffees. I became a big coffee fan because of being a barista. I took a souvenir when I left. I took a few souvenirs when I left, for that matter. But it's funny to think back. They would have these basically instruction manuals of how to make the coffees, and after a while, obviously you didn't need them, and you learn things. And we were making our own special drinks at some points, just messing around. A lot of goofing around in that cafe. We did, there was people that would get into food fights on occasion, or whipped cream fights, or whatever. It was pretty ridiculous. I'm sure all of us would have ultimately been fired if they had security cameras around and saw some of the craziness that we were doing sometimes, but they didn't, and everything continued the way it was. And I don't know, it was really cool. And becoming the supervisor was weird, because when I became the supervisor, I noticed an immediate shift in a lot of my coworkers. Like we were, equals before that. And now I was their manager, even though I was getting paid an extra 50 cents an hour. And by no means were any of us getting paid well. There was definitely a shift in they didn't know if I'd be cool or not anymore. And I think I quickly showed them I'm still me. Although my own bosses had told me at the time, those people out there, they are not your friends anymore. We're your friends now. You're part of management. And that was definitely a creepy thing to occur. And there was a lot of weird things when I think back about that place. But I had a great time. I got into reading a lot. Just, not always books, but magazines. I would listen to music because they had a music department. Just all types of stuff that I would have never got into. It made me more of a fan of bookstores in general in a lot of ways. And then it was just a cool hangout spot. It really brought creative people together. And while I definitely would not do that type of job now, I definitely have a fondness for those type of places. They bring creative people together. And obviously times have changed. Most people buy things online, so there's probably a lot less foot traffic, but you'd be surprised. People enjoy going to a bookstore and hanging out, and they might get a coffee and spend hours there. And it was, it was impressive. And you'd have regulars, and some of their drink orders would be crazy and stuff, but it was just part of the culture around there. It was, it was always interesting to see what was going to happen from day to day. That's for sure. So that's what it was like being barista. It wasn't so much about the coffees and food as much as the overall experience and the friends I made. Those were my biggest takeaways. But I definitely enjoyed the food and drinks too. So don't get me wrong, that all came in handy. And we would sometimes play guitar in front of the store and just hang out in front of the store playing guitar on our breaks and stuff. Sometimes even earning a few tips from people coming and going. So good times. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this little breakdown of what it was like to be a barista in my early, late teens, early 20s, and forever grateful. Have a wonderful day. Talk to you on the next one. Have a wonderful day, but also I hope you enjoy all these episodes. I try to make them fun and interesting. So anyways, see you later.